Paper 77. The Midway Creatures. Most of the inhabited worlds of Nebadon harbor one or more groups of unique beings existing on a life-functioning level about midway between those of the mortals of the realms and of the angelic orders. Hence are they called midway creatures. They appear to be an accident of time, but they occur so widespreadly and are so valuable as helpers that we have all long since accepted them as one of the essential orders of our combined planetary ministry. On Urantia, there function two distinct orders of midwayers, the primary or senior corps, who came into being back in the days of Dalmatia, and the secondary or younger group, whose origin dates from the times of Adam. 1. The primary midwayers. The primary midwayers have their genesis in a unique interassociation of the material and the spiritual on Urantia. We know of the existence of similar creatures on other worlds and in other systems, but they originated by dissimilar techniques. It is well always to bear in mind that the successive bestowals of the sons of God on an evolving planet produce marked changes in the spiritual economy of the realm, and sometimes so modify the workings of the interassociation of spiritual and material agencies on a planet as to create situations indeed difficult of understanding. The status of the 100 corporeal members of Prince Caligastia's staff illustrates just such a unique interassociation. As ascendant Urantia citizens of Jerusalem, they were supermaterial creatures without reproductive prerogatives. As descendant planetary ministers on Urantia, they were material sex creatures capable of procreating material offspring, as some of them later did. What we cannot satisfactorily explain is how these 100 could function in the parental role on a supermaterial level, but that is exactly what happened. A supermaterial, non-sexual liaison of a male and a female member of the corporeal staff resulted in the appearance of the firstborn of the primary midwayers. It was immediately discovered that a creature of this order, midway between the mortal and angelic levels, would be of great service in carrying on the affairs of the prince's headquarters, and each couple of the corporeal staff was accordingly granted permission to produce a similar being. This effort resulted in the first group of 50 midway creatures. After a year of observing the work of this unique group, the planetary prince authorized the reproduction of midwayers without restriction. This plan was carried out as long as the power to create continued, and the original core of 50,000 was accordingly brought into being. A period of 1/2 year intervened between the production of each midwayer, and when 1,000 such beings had been born to each couple, no more were ever forthcoming. And there is no explanation available as to why this power was exhausted upon the appearance of the 1,000th offspring. No amount of further experimentation ever resulted in anything but failure. These creatures constituted the intelligence corps of the prince's administration. They ranged far and wide, studying and observing the world races, and rendering other invaluable services to the prince and his staff in the work of influencing human society remote from the planetary headquarters. This regime continued until the tragic days of the planetary rebellion, which ensnared a little over 4/5 of the primary midwayers. The loyal corps entered the service of the Melchizedek receivers, functioning under the titular leadership of Van until the days of Adam. 2. The Nodite race. While this is the narrative of the origin, nature, and function of the midway creatures of Urantia, the kinship between the two orders, primary and secondary, makes it necessary to interrupt the story of the primary midwayers at this point, in order to follow out the line of descent from the rebel members of the corporeal staff of Prince Caligastia from the days of the planetary rebellion to the times of Adam. It was this line of inheritance which, in the early days of the second garden, furnished 1/2 of the ancestry for the secondary order of midway creatures. The physical members of the prince's staff had been constituted sex creatures for the purpose of participating in the plan of procreating offspring embodying the combined qualities of their special order, united with those of the selected stock of the Andon tribes, and all of this was in anticipation of the subsequent appearance of Adam. The life-carriers had planned a new type of mortal embracing the union of the conjoint offspring of the prince's staff with the first-generation offspring of Adam and Eve. They had thus projected a plan envisioning a new order of planetary creatures whom they hoped would become the teacher-rulers of human society. Such beings were designed for social sovereignty, not civil sovereignty. But since this project almost completely miscarried, we shall never know what an aristocracy of benign leadership and matchless culture Urantia was thus deprived of. For when the corporeal staff later reproduced, it was subsequent to the rebellion, and after they had been deprived of their connection with the life currents of the system. The post-rebellion era on Urantia witnessed many unusual happenings. A great civilization, the culture of Dalmatia, was going to pieces. The Nephilim, Nodites, were on earth in those days, and when these sons of the gods went in to the daughters of men, and they bore to them, their children were the mighty men of old, the men of renown. While hardly sons of the gods, the staff and their early descendants were so regarded by the evolutionary mortals of those distant days, even their stature came to be magnified by tradition. This, then, is the origin of the well-nigh universal folk tale of the gods who came down to earth, and there with the daughters of men begot an ancient race of heroes. And all this legend became further confused with the race mixtures of the later appearing Adamites in the second garden. Since the 100 corporeal members of the prince's staff carried germ plasm of the Andonic human strains, it would naturally be expected that, if they engaged in sexual reproduction, their progeny would altogether resemble the offspring of other Andonite parents. But when the 60 rebels of the staff, the followers of Nod, actually engaged in sexual reproduction, their children proved to be far superior in almost every way to both the Andonite and the Sangic peoples. This unexpected excellence characterized not only physical and intellectual qualities, but also spiritual capacities. These mutant traits appearing in the first Nodite generation resulted from certain changes which had been wrought in the configuration and in the chemical constituents of the inheritance factors of the Andonic germ plasm. These changes were caused by the presence in the bodies of the staff members of the powerful life-maintenance circuits of the Satania system. These life circuits caused the chromosomes of the specialized Urantia pattern to reorganize more after the patterns of the standardized Satania specialization of the ordained Nebadon life manifestation. The technique of this germ plasm metamorphosis by the action of the system life currents is not unlike those procedures whereby Urantia scientists modify the germ plasm of plants and animals by the use of X-rays. Thus did the Nodite peoples arise out of certain peculiar and unexpected modifications occurring in the life plasm, which had been transferred from the bodies of the Andonite contributors to those of the corporeal staff members by the Avalon surgeons. It will be recalled that the 100 Andonite germ plasm contributors were in turn made possessors of the organic complement of the tree of life, so that the Satania life currents likewise invested their bodies. The 44 modified Andonites who followed the staff into rebellion also mated among themselves, and made a great contribution to the better strains of the Nodite people. These two groups, embracing 104 individuals who carried the modified Andonite germ plasm, constitute the ancestry of the Nodites, the eighth race to appear on Urantia. And this new feature of human life on Urantia represents another phase of the outworking of the original plan of utilizing this planet as a life modification world, except that this was one of the unforeseen developments. The Pure-Line Nodites were a magnificent race, but they gradually mingled with the evolutionary peoples of Earth, and before long great deterioration had occurred. 10,000 years after the rebellion, they had lost ground to the point where their average length of life was little more than that of the evolutionary races.